I found myself wanting to get a new case these days. A few requirements. It should ideally cost less than 40 euros, so we're talking about a really cheap case. My computer is in the same room that I sleep in, and since many times it stays open during the night, I didn't want LED lights or RGB. They make it harder for me to sleep. Plus, those increase the cost, so I'll be saving some money as well. In a similar vein, tempered glass is a no-no as well. It's like Zach says, glass is glass and glass breaks. I am highly interested in thermal performance. The case needs to have a mesh front. And since there is no point in testing a mesh case with no fans, I'll get a couple of budget fans to test it with. Lastly, I don't use optical drives anymore, so I have no need for a deep case. I am interested in testing a shallow case. With the fans closer to the parts that need cooling, it should perform better theoretically. I did some research on the web. I found a case that looked promising, and since I could not find another English-speaking review at the time, I took it upon myself to try and present it to you. Hello, I am Constantine, and this is Cougar's MX410 Mesh Review. The case is made of typical lightweight metal along with some plastic for the front panel. It won't win any originality awards as far as looks are concerned. It is very plain looking with some angles on the front panel to give it some aggressive overtones. The front panel can be removed easily enough. It's mostly mesh with a pair of dust filter strips. I can tell you after a month of usage that while it doesn't look that it's able to filter all that well, since the mesh isn't very fine, I was pleasantly surprised. It did an adequate job at filtering. Opening the side panel, as is typical, can be achieved by unscrewing the two thumb screws in the back. The side panels are your typical pull back and then a way to open. The cable cutouts are very sparse. There's one on the top left for the EPS power connector, 3 on the side and 1 on the bottom. The case can fit a full-size ATX board. This cutout allows for SATA cable management and it's one of the drawbacks of this case. We'll come back to it after installing the components. The case can accommodate up to 3 120mm fans in the front. Bear in mind that they can be mounted from the inside of the case. Also, most of the third fan will push air below the PSU shroud. Due to the PSU shroud, however, you can only fit a 240mm radiator. On the bottom of the case, there's just the single cutout for your cable management needs. On the back of the case you can find the pre-installed Cougar fan. It's pretty loud, so you don't want it running at 100%. There's a cutout on the PSU shroud to show your PSU label. The PCIe slot covers are not reusable. What you see here were salvaged from my old case. There's a plastic that covers the PCIe mount screws. I don't like it. It feels cheap, it's hard to put back on, and frankly I don't understand the reason for it. On the bottom of the case there's just 4 feet with a rubber-like surface and a very simple and cheap dust filter which covers the PSU air intake. It's not very easy to put back on. Good news on the top of the panel where we can find the power button an HDD and power LED, mic and headphone jack, and 4 USB ports, 2 of the USB 3.0 variety. Way above its price class. The power button is clicky, tactile, and feels high quality. The LEDs are white and not distractingly powerful. There's a magnetic removable dust filter on the top, feels to be of decent quality. Pretty easy to remove, clean, and put back on. There is space for two 120mm fans below that dust filter, fans which theoretically can be mounted on two positions, towards one side of the panel or the other. On the back side, the first thing I noticed was the SSD bracket. If you're going to use a single SSD and no other storage, that's what you are going to use. There are plenty of hooks to tie cables with tie-ups. There's decent enough space for your cables, even with my zero effort cable management, as you'll soon see. On the left here, there are mounting holes where you're able to fasten two SSDs, but you'll be sacrificing most of the cable management holes to do so. You will not use them. On the bottom of the case there's an HDD caddy and the location where the PSU rests. You might have noticed some white anti-vibration stickers in various locations. Those were installed by me. The PSU mounting place has just this single black anti-vibration tab by default. The irony is though that the PSU can't sit on it. Here, take a peek at the installed system. It doesn't seem to serve a purpose. Maybe it's there to help with the PSU installation, who knows. The case is wide enough to fit the hard drives perpendicular to the length of the case. The hard drive caddy holding the drives is removable and secured by two thumb screws. Not the easiest thing to remove though, as it's pretty tight. Removing the hard drive caddy creates a decent amount of space on the bottom of the case. So that's the rundown on the empty case. It's time to take a look at it with a system in and talk about the experience of building and using it. As I mentioned at the beginning, with the case I got 3 budget fans to do additional tests with, as I didn't think there was much benefit in using a mesh case with almost zero airflow. I chose the $5 Arctic P12 PWM PST to fill that role. The case can fit almost all tower coolers. Here you see a Noctua D14 dwarfing the case. It can also fit up to 300mm long graphics cards, smaller if you use a radiator. It could have used a couple more cable management holes in the PSU shroud. Granted, with no glass, no one will know about your messy cables. There isn't much space on the top with a fan installed and a large air cooler. You should really use a modular PSU with this build. Attach the EPS power cable on the motherboard and route the cable first before mounting the board in the case. You won't be able to reach inside the case to plug the EPS cable if you're using a large CPU cooler. Here's where you might encounter a problem. Due to the limited cable cutouts and the layout of the case, you might not be able to use the USB 3.0 header if it's located on the right side and it's not perpendicular to the board. There is a camber to allow for more cables in the back, which unfortunately obstructs ports that need to be plugged parallel to the motherboard. There should have been a larger cutout there to accommodate more options. Now, you can probably use an angled USB 3.0 adapter, but that's expenses one should not take when considering a budget case. You might also have issues with the SATA ports for the same reason, if they're higher up or lower down and can't use the cutout. Let's go to another area where you might have issues. If you're going to use the hard drive caddy, you can barely fit a largest modular PSU. There's just about 20 cm or 8 inches of space to fit a PSU and the cables coming out of it. For reference, my PSU is 60 cm or 6.3 inches long. And it's not only the length that is the issue. You'll encounter hardship installing the PSU due to the limited height of the PSU shroud as well. Well, since we're talking about the drawbacks, here's the last one of them. The caddy is badly designed. Theoretically, it can fit two 3.5-inch drives only. You can't fit 2.5-inch drives at all. Heck, there's just a single actually usable 2.5-inch mount location in the whole case. You could do, however, what I did and simply shove the drives inside the caddy. They'll be fine. Let's look at the performance. I am not tech Jesus though, I have no other base of reference beside my old case. And the comparison is not going to be fair. Why, you may ask? Because my old case is this behemoth. This is the Akasa Venom Toxic. It features full mesh body, two 24 cm fans, one as an intake and one as an exhaust, and another 14 cm fan acting as an exhaust. Look at the results and be surprised. The tiny case with just a single additional intake competes with my old monster of a case in CPU thermals. With 3 fans it even beats it, though not by a lot. Also, the motherboard temperature is significantly better with the new case. That's the benefit of having the intake fans so close to the motherboard. Sadly, of course, the new case cannot beat the GPU thermals of the old case even with 3 fans installed. Not only did the old case have a 240mm fan pointing straight below the graphics card, but the side panel was also mesh, so there were multiple escape routes for the heat buildup. But there's an additional takeaway with the test. You'll need 2 fans as intakes, or at least one if you're not going to use a graphics card. There is some benefit for a third as an exhaust, but not by much in my case, since the CPU cooler already acts as an exhaust. So what's the takeaway here? The case is built flawlessly. I didn't encounter a single defect. Build quality is great for how little you're paying. I love the form factor, it makes sense. It fits large graphics cards and performs decently as far as I can tell, but it does come with some drawbacks. There is a lack of usable 2.5-inch mount locations on the case. You have to improvise if you're going to be using more than one SSD. Also, you'll need to make sure that you won't encounter any incompatibilities with that SATA port cutout and the cables coming out of it. So, if you want a budget stealth case, don't have many 2.5-inch drives, and you're sure you won't have any issues with a USB 3.0 header or SATA ports, then yes, the MX410 Mesh is recommended, as long as you get a couple of budget fans with it.